Hey guys, so in today's video we are going to be watching a Fox News segment where the Fox News host is interviewing Tim Pool. And although I would say it's embarrassing for Tim Pool to do these things because he embarrasses himself, I can't deny it that these videos, especially on YouTube, do pretty good. They have 2 million views, 95,000 likes, and only 3,000 dislikes. This is pretty good for Tim Pool. He gets showered with praises in the comments, but he should still, in my humble opinion, be embarrassed, as he claims to be a centrist, but I don't know, like, is he really a centrist? But here he goes on and peddles wild conspiracy theories, and he thinks he's like telling the truth. He's like dropping these truth bombs. But bro, like, you should be embarrassed being a centrist or whatever, going on to Fox News and peddle lies. But we'll watch the video. Let's see what he says.
Welcome back to Fox News Prime Time. We've obtained new images out of Chicago from over the weekend. Please be advised.
Young people have fun sparks. Oh, young people have fun sparks COVID fear-mongering. Okay, let's see.
May find what we're about to show you graphic. Thousands of young people gathered for a 3-day music festival without
This guy really says you're going to find this graphic.
masks. Look at them. Didn't they hear Joe Biden's dire warning about a second dark winter? Many of those who claim to follow the science became very upset at this sight.
Yeah,
they don't like.
I mean, it's a pretty upsetting sight. It's pretty graphic.
You see people outside having fun. They want you to believe these concert goers are in grave danger. And that might be true. They are in Chicago, after all.
That's because Chicago is dangerous. That's, I got the joke, but it's like, it's their attempt at humor, so like funny.
Last month, the city saw 105 murders, 3 times the amount of COVID deaths.
Yeah, but I hate how they continually do these things where it's like 105 murders, but in what context? Were they all like, you know what I mean? Like, there's like 35 COVID deaths. Oh, but we have 105 murders. Like, where's the context in all of this?
In Washington, D.C., murders also surpassed COVID deaths by a near 3-to-1 ratio in July. Despite these numbers, the media and elected officials are seemingly still trying to figure out how to flatten the curve instead of addressing the violent crime pandemic plaguing inner cities. Tim Pool hosts the...
Did he say the violent crime?
Addressing the violent crime pandemic.
Oh, okay, so now violent crime is a pandemic because, like, a government can't address several issues. They can't like compartmentalize, deal with COVID, and then also deal with crimes. Like, for them, like, cause it's a non sequitur, right? Like, you can't compare these two things. Like, oh, they're dealing with COVID, so they're obviously not dealing with crime or whatever.
Inner cities. Tim Pool hosts the Timcast IRL podcast, and he joins me now. Tim, it's good to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ben.
This level of hypocrisy that we see from the leader.
Look at the level of projection. Like, they're the ones being, right? Like, this is like the hypocrisy on their level. Like, oh, talking about, oh, why doesn't the government do anything to fix murder crimes? But when they actually try to like come up with solutions, these same hosts are like, why are they infringing on people's rights? Why are they trying to take away my guns?
Of America's inner cities. It's audacious in a way that I really have. I mean, it's like nothing I've seen before. It's as if they imagine that the American people are just too stupid to pay any attention to the level of hypocrisy and the level of government's failure to address the problems that are clearly impacting our communities. What do you think's going on here?
Like, what? Like, let's see what
I honestly have no idea. Having grown up in Chicago, I have personally witnessed the gun violence. I'm wondering why, after my entire life, they've not been able to solve it. They seem to...
Look at him, like, he's so close like, Tim, how do you deal with gun violence? How do you deal with it? But he's not going to say the obvious, right? He's not going to say, hey, let's restrict people's access to guns. No, of course he's not going to say that.
Just keep doubling down.
Like, and also, like, the host was like, oh, this recent crime, and then Tim Pool was like, yeah, it's been going on since I was like a kid.
When it comes to the COVID restrictions, our leaders, the mayors, the governors, we see them flaunting the rules. They don't wear masks. They tell everyone else to. The funniest thing about Chicago is they're warning us that the Delta variant is on the rise. We gotta bunker down and make sure we slow the spread, but only after we can make tens of millions from our big rock concerts. At the
Bro, like, imagine, like, in what world is he saying, like, because obviously, like, this rock concert, they're equating it to, like, oh, these, like, young liberal people, and like, look at this picture of diverse people, and they're like, you know, it's, I feel like for them it's that level of hypocrisy where they look at a protest, a protest where people are like, we don't want to wear masks, and then they're like, they praise them as, hey, good for you for not like letting the government dictate what you do. But then you have like this rock concert, and then they condemn them like, oh, why aren't you following what the government tells you to do? Why aren't you following your Democrat government? And it's just like, it's ridiculous.
They come out and tell us that all of the Black Lives Matter protests weren't spreading COVID, and all the right-wing lockdown protests were. I can't believe people fall for these narratives, and it kind of breaks my heart to see.
Well, it really is frustrating on a number of different levels, but for me in particular, I mean, I know people who've experienced all manner of different criminal situations in Washington, D.C. that took hours to get responses.
He's still talking about crime. He's still talking about like crime rates. Like, then if you want the crime rate to go down, let's just have more lockdown so that the crime rate goes down, and so that there's no traffic and the cops can respond faster, and they can, you know, go over the speed limit to get to the crisis where they're called to.
I'm sure that you saw that footage. And in fact, I know you talked about it on your podcast recently from the DC police chief, talking about how far behind he is when it comes to the level of manpower that he needs in order to maintain a safe city. That to me seems to...
Hey, I don't know. COVID's been spreading, so maybe cops have been getting sick or maybe dying, and they haven't been able to go to work.
Be a scandal that everyone should be talking about, and instead we're just debating about whether you need to wear a mask and what the penalties should be if you don't.
That's what they're debating. That's what Fox News
is talking about. It's a perfect
scapegoat.
It's a perfect excuse, a perfect distraction. There's so many places in our country that have had...
Keep distracting away from like the COVID deaths by still arguing if COVID masks are effective.
And violence, especially over the past year. We've had untold riots and violence and political terror on small businesses. And then as soon as the bad news comes that could negatively impact their political world, the Democratic Party, all of a sudden they got to shift everything back to the argument about the pandemic. And they've got allies in media who allow them to do it. They don't
look at this like circular logic Tim is going through.
They don't challenge them on these things very often, if at all. And often they translate on their behalf and explain what they're really doing and why. My favorite is that...
I love how like everyone does this, right? Even Fox News hosts, even even Tim Pool, he hears what they say, and then they regurgitate, or they say, oh, they're actually talking about it this way. Like, this is the level of projection and hypocrisy that Tim Pool should be embarrassed that he's doing.
Study, it came out of Colorado, I believe, one of the universities, showing that actually the Black Lives Matter protests may have reduced the spread of COVID. As if we're supposed to believe that.
No, watch him like talk about this without any context. If you actually go and see what study he's talking about how like there were Black Lives Matter protests, and people, you know, when you go, for the most part, people who went to these protests, they wore goggles, they were facial coverings, long sleeve, because in part because they were afraid of being tear gassed, of having a chemical weapon thrown at them by the police. And consequently, I guess it also like prevented the spread of COVID. And also the study found that a lot more people were less willing to go out because they were afraid of the potential violence that these protests were going to have. So they didn't, and they also knew it wasn't a good time to go out and about doing their business because there's like a protest going on. So a lot of people, especially the older people who are more vulnerable, didn't go outside. But with COVID mask protests, I think that's what they were like calling them, where like people were protesting masks. They weren't wearing like facial coverings. They weren't covering up and they were close together because they were protesting all these restrictions. And more people, like older people, more vulnerable people, were going to those protests. So it's obviously like going off of like numbers. It's the COVID virus was more likely to spread in a mask protest.
While our cities are being attacked and some small businesses are being destroyed, now we're seeing escalating crime, and we're not getting a conversation about it. I think people on the right, conservatives, people, disaffected liberals.
It's like he says, this violence has been going on since Tim Pool was a kid, obviously way before that. So it's not as much of a breaking news as COVID. You know what I mean? Like COVID is like 2 years. So of course it's going to make more of a news headline that people want to read. But obviously also like COVID is more dangerous because you don't know how you can get it, you know. Can you get it by like going outside, by being close to people? If I go into the store, will I get it? There's a lot more variables there. Like if I get it, will I die? Will I have complications? No, do I have a pre-existing condition that I don't know about?
And start asking these questions and not let them pull the conversation back. We've got a vaccine. They've gone and talked about how effective it is and how it's working. It's fantastic. And we're going to get those vaccination numbers up. Okay, then why are you coming out with more restrictions, more
Yeah, you know, he's saying we have the vaccine, but at the same time, Tim Pool's on Twitter saying, oh, we don't know enough about the vaccine and it doesn't affect me or my viewers. So should we really get it? But now he's here like, oh, we have the COVID vaccine, the restrictions should be lifted. But if not enough people are taking it, and if now we have the variant, which is a lot more dangerous, of course we're going to have more restrictions because people aren't vaccinating fast enough. The people who should be getting the vaccine aren't getting the vaccine. And we're beginning to see the effects of this with the Delta variant.
Why are you trying to act like everyone's got to stay home? Meanwhile, you get to do whatever you want.
Tim, you are someone who has been at the front end
they always scapegoat this like they. Who's this like they?
Media innovation over the past several years. You've created really an alternate way for people to get some of this information that is never really talked about within the dominant forces of corporate media. It seems to me that you and people like you have a critical role in shifting this conversation to what really matters. What are some of the ways that people who may not have your platform, but who want to try to shift that narrative, as you say, how can they get involved? How can they share information that cuts across and actually highlights the things that matter, as opposed to going on with this corporate narrative?
Corporate narrative?
Well, it's hard because we've got the issue of big tech.
I was about to say, they'll say like Democrat narrative, corporate narrative, but like in their minds, that's the same thing. They think that despite Republicans are being funded by a lot of these corporations, but for them, you know, they're not the bad guys. No, it's the Democrats, these corporations that are supporting them, the ones that are pushing the false narratives.
We see cancel culture that many on the left deny, but they're
he always like reverts to like cancel culture. Let's go.
The issue of big tech censorship. We see cancel culture that many on the left deny, but they're regular people with small accounts trying to express themselves. They'll say something like learn to code and get banned on Twitter. But I really do think you need a critical mass of people.
Bro, just make a new account. Like, if you don't have a following and if you get like banned, like if you get caught in the filters, just make a new account.
Stepping up and expressing themselves, and I understand it's very difficult. You know, for people who have families and children, they're trying to just get through this to make sure their kids will have a better future, will be able to have food to eat and have a job to support their families. But I really do believe that if everybody who opposed, the wokeness, the hypocrisy from our leaders, if they did speak up and they were brave, then I think we would see a dramatic and immediate change.
Yeah, bro, just tweet at these woke politicians, tweet at these woke corporations, and they'll stop being woke. Just tweet at them, keep tweeting at them. That's Tim Pool's activism, tweeting at these big bad politicians and at these big bad corporations, and that's how they stop being woke.
You have to go out and make that stand, though. Take that risk in order to shift the narrative. Tim, thanks for joining me. Up next.
Hey, Sean Hannity here.
Yeah, it's again, like, my take from this video is Tim Pool keeps embarrassing himself. He keeps making these circular, hypocritical arguments, and at the end of the day, I don't know, I feel like you should get vaccinated. Like, I feel like people are making it much worse. They're strengthening the virus the longer they keep peddling, or the longer they keep believing in these conspiracy theories. And it's such a shame that someone with Tim Pool's platform is continuously peddling these lies. So yeah, guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.